Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another show. This month we're doing something slightly different. Now, our focal point isn't a typical book. Well, it's a book, but it's the book of Ruth. Our focus will be on the dynamic between Naomi and Ruth and how it applies to us as mothers and daughters. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Today's topic is processing grief. Now, for us to get started with that, I'd love for us to visit the story of Naomi and Ruth, starting with Ruth 1, and we'll read through verses 1 through 22. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man, Bethlehem went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his two sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his two sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathi's and Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her two sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the women were left of her two, and the woman was left of her two sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her daughters-in-law, Go, return to each her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead, and with me. The Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters. Why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, you go your way. For I am too old to have an husband. If I should say, if I have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up her voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And they said, Is this Naomi? And she said unto them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. Now, I want to focus a bit on this specific verse, Ruth 1 and 21. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? This is a very interesting scripture. It not only allows us to see truly the grief that Naomi encountered, but it really helps us to identify with sometimes how we feel in relation to God. You know, grief is one of those things that it can be pretty confusing for the person going through as well as the person who may be trying to comfort that person going through. But before we get too deep into it, let's get started. So today's focus is on processing grief, how to navigate emotional storms. So you may say, what exactly is grief? We hear that word a lot. She's grieving, he's grieving, I'm experiencing grief. But what exactly is grief? So grief can be defined as deep sorrow, misery, and it's usually a response to a loss or a death. Now, recognizing it in the case of Naomi, we can clearly see from the verse 21 where she says, "Have seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me." We can truly hear her heart. We can sense how she's feeling. And in the above verses, we see where she's grieving. For she says, "For it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me." She's in pain. Naomi is in pain. And I'm pretty sure she's experienced a lot of these things here: the shock and disbelief, the sadness, the guilt, the fear, the anger. She was saying to her daughters in law, "I don't have any more sons to give you. Just return home to where your mother's home and go dwell there." But Ruth said, "No, I want to be with you. I want to go. I want to forsake all that I have to be with you. Whoever you serve, I'll serve. When you live, where you die, I'm going to live and I'm going to die right there with you." So, understanding grief is not only essential to the person grieving, but those that you're connected to. And I'll explain this a bit further. Understanding its effects. So, when we talk about grief, we tend to talk about the symptoms of it, but we sometimes don't really talk much about the effects of it and how it can affect us physically as well as emotional as well as others that are connected to us. So some of the things that grief can do to us, the physical body, is it can cause fatigue, it can cause weight loss or gain, aches and pain, emotional roller coasters. It can cause a series of things to the body because grieving is honestly, truly at its root, it's a process, and it's something that most of us don't fully understand because no one really wakes up and says, "Hey, I want to go through a loss today, and let me go ahead and just prepare myself for grief." Now I know to some degree you can prepare for it, but you really don't know how you're going to feel until it happens. And when I talk about grief, let me give you some examples. So, grief could be the loss of, let's say, a relationship, the loss of health. It could even be losing a job, losing financial stability, a miscarriage, the death of a pet or an animal, a loved one, loss of a dream. It could be loss of a friendship, loss of safety. It's mainly dealing with loss. So when you're losing something or when you have lost something, it's really hard to know how you're going to respond to it until it happens. So there's not really much you can do to prepare. You can mentally prepare, but emotionally, sometimes you don't always know how you'll respond until you're in that situation. But the Holy Spirit will absolutely be there for you. He will absolutely guide you. He will absolutely strengthen you throughout your process. And so I spoke a little bit before about the effects of it and also the symptoms of it as it relates to the grief and the fatigue. Now let's delve a little bit into Naomi and what she encountered. So keep in mind here, she definitely experienced the loss of her husband. But here's the thing: it wasn't just her husband; it was her husband and her two sons. So now she has two daughters-in-law. We'll just say daughters, who she is tasked to care for, or rather, they see her as someone to care for them. And so she's like, "I don't know that I have much more I can give to you. So just go, live your lives, and I'll live mine." She was grieving. She was trying to cope with the loss of her husband. And then she realized she lost her sons. And then she's got these two ladies, two daughters, and she's thinking, how in the world am I going to care for you? So let's delve into how grief can affect mother and daughter relationships. It can, in a healthy way, it can deepen emotional connection, meaning it could strengthen the bond between mothers and daughters, as if, let's say, they're experiencing grief together, or if one's experiencing it, it can create a dialogue, or a two-way conversation where grief is now the subject of conversation, and focusing on healing becomes a thing that connects the two. So grief, yes, grief is not something we don't look forward to. Grief is not something that we uh, say, hey, I'm going to experience this today. But it is something that God can use as a way to bring two people together. And in the sense of mothers and daughter relationships, He can truly strengthen it. And one can really be a blessing to the other. And when we look at Naomi and Ruth, as we continue, we'll see how they were a blessing to each other. Thank you so much for joining us here for another episode with Truth Talks. Feel free to connect with us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Title Your Truth. If you need to reach out to us for anything, for prayer, just to have conversation, dialogue, feel free to shoot us an email at hello@titleyourtruth.com. If you prefer to also hear the audio versions of our episodes, feel free to go to www.truth-talks-podcast.com. And please, we absolutely would love if you would join our community group at www.titleyourtruth.com so you can connect with us, chat with other mothers and daughters, and just join in on the conversation. So we look forward to chatting with you soon. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week.